The morning was calm in the busy city, where tall glass buildings reflected the sunshine. People moved quickly on the sidewalks, carrying bags, holding coffee cups, and staring at their phones. Inside one of the most expensive shopping districts, there stood a luxury store with golden lights shining from its wide glass windows. The store displayed handbags, shoes, and clothes that only a small part of the world could afford. Employees in polished suits moved about, always careful to keep their posture straight and their voices smooth. They liked to look important, because working there was not just a job, it was a way to show off status. In the middle of this polished place, an older woman quietly walked in. Her steps were slow but steady, and her face carried the calm expression of someone who had lived through many experiences in life. She wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, and on her arm hung a small purse that had clearly been used for years. She did not look like the kind of customer who usually walked into this place, but her eyes were kind and curious. She wanted to buy something small, perhaps a gift. She was not thinking about showing off, only about choosing something meaningful. As soon as she entered, one of the young employees standing near the counter noticed her. His name was Martin. He was tall, well-dressed, and his shoes were so shiny they looked new every day. He had only been working there for a year, but already he believed he was more important than most of the customers who walked in. He believed that wealth and appearance told the story of a person's value. If someone looked simple, he assumed they were not worth his time. When he saw the older woman, he raised one eyebrow and smirked. To him, she looked out of place. He leaned slightly toward another employee and whispered something, making them both chuckle softly. They thought nobody noticed, but a few customers nearby caught the look on their faces. The older woman, however, walked forward with calm dignity. She did not hear or perhaps did not care about the whispers. She stood in front of a shelf where some elegant scarves were displayed. She touched one of them gently, as if she appreciated the work behind it. She wanted to ask for help, so she looked around politely. Martin saw her and sighed dramatically, as though it was a burden to walk over to her. "Yes, can I help you?" he asked, his voice clipped and cold. The woman smiled kindly. "Yes, please. I would like to see this scarf. It looks very beautiful." Martin narrowed his eyes. He looked at the scarf, then back at her. "That scarf," he said, "is one of the most expensive items we have. Are you sure you want to see it?" His tone carried disbelief, as if he could not imagine she had the money to pay for it. The woman stayed gentle in her response. "Yes, I would like to see it. Thank you." Martin rolled his eyes slightly before pulling it down. He handled it carelessly, unlike the way he treated other customers. He handed it to her as if doing her a favor. The woman touched the scarf with appreciation, smiling softly as she ran her fingers across the fabric. "It is very fine work," she said quietly. "How much is it?" Martin gave a short laugh. "It's far more than you think. This scarf costs thousands. I don't think it's in your budget." He did not lower his voice, and a few customers nearby looked over, shocked by his rudeness. The woman did not get angry. She simply looked at him with calm eyes. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice soft. She did not argue, she did not defend herself, and she did not raise her tone. She simply continued to hold the scarf as if considering it. Martin grew impatient. He hated that she did not react the way he expected. Usually, when he looked down on people, they quickly walked out, embarrassed. But this woman seemed too calm, and that bothered him. "You know," he continued, trying to push her away, "this is a luxury store. People usually come here because they can afford such things. Maybe you would be more comfortable somewhere else. There are plenty of shops down the street." Still, the woman only smiled. Her eyes carried kindness, almost pity, for this young man who clearly had so much pride but so little wisdom. She placed the scarf back on the counter carefully. "Thank you, young man. I understand." Her gentle response confused some of the other customers, who were beginning to whisper to each other. They wondered why the employee was being so rude, and why the woman did not raise her voice. But they also noticed something unusual about her grace. It felt like she was used to handling life with patience. Meanwhile, Martin stood taller, believing he had won. In his mind, he had done his job by keeping the store exclusive. He smirked again, proud of himself. He had no idea who this woman was. The store carried on with its usual busy rhythm, but a quiet tension lingered in the air. The employees who had laughed earlier now avoided looking directly at the woman, because a small part of them felt guilty. Customers continued shopping, but they glanced from time to time at the older woman, curious about how she would respond. The woman simply walked toward another shelf, ignoring the arrogance she had faced. She looked at small items, examining them with interest. Her manner was calm, almost graceful, as though she carried an inner strength that no rude words could break. Little did Martin know that in only a few minutes, his world would change completely. He thought he had the power to decide who belonged in that store, but life was about to teach him otherwise. And so the stage was set: a proud young employee, too blinded by appearances, and an older woman, patient and calm, with a story that went far deeper than her simple dress or old purse. The store was about to witness a moment no one would forget. Martin walked back to the counter with his chest held high, satisfied that he had reminded the older woman of her place. He leaned against the polished surface, pretending to look busy while keeping an eye on her. In his mind, he expected her to leave soon, embarrassed and defeated. But to his surprise, she stayed. She moved gracefully from one section to another, examining the jewelry, the bags, and the shoes, as if she had all the time in the world. Her face never showed anger, only patience, and it confused him. Other customers in the store began to sense the atmosphere. A young couple nearby whispered to each other. The man frowned, shaking his head at Martin's behavior, while the woman softly said, "She looks so kind. Why would he treat her like that?" They returned to their shopping, but their eyes lingered on the older woman with sympathy. The woman finally picked up the courage to ask again, approaching a different display. She reached out toward a pair of elegant gloves, their leather soft and carefully stitched. "Excuse me," she said politely, hoping for help. Martin sighed loudly before walking over. He moved slowly, making sure she knew he was doing it unwillingly. "Those gloves are from Italy," he said, his tone sharp. "They are very expensive, not something for everyday use. Are you sure you even want to hold them?" The woman's gentle smile never faded. "Yes, please, I would like to see them." He picked them up and handed them to her, but not with the care he usually showed customers. Normally, he would present items on a tray or fold them neatly on tissue paper. But this time, he dropped them into her hands without grace. The woman still thanked him. "They are beautiful," she said softly, turning the gloves in her hands as if admiring the craftsmanship. "I wonder how warm they must feel." Martin rolled his eyes. "Warm, yes, but you have to buy them first. And trust me, they are not cheap. Perhaps this store isn't the right place for you. There are plenty of other shops with more affordable things." A silence fell between them for a moment. The woman held the gloves carefully, as if protecting them from the arrogance in his voice. She placed them back on the counter gently and nodded. "Thank you, young man. I understand." The customers who had overheard the exchange were now clearly unsettled. A middle-aged man in a business suit glanced at Martin, shaking his head slightly. A mother with her teenage daughter whispered, "That poor woman, why is he treating her so badly?" Still, the woman remained calm. She turned her attention toward a display of necklaces, her eyes filled with appreciation for their beauty. It seemed as though she was not bothered by Martin's sharp words, though anyone watching could tell she was being humiliated. Martin returned to the counter, whispering to another employee, "She doesn't belong here. She probably just came in to waste time. Can you believe she touched those gloves?" His co-worker gave a nervous smile, not daring to agree too loudly. Deep down, even the other employees felt uneasy about how far Martin was taking things. The woman, however, continued walking slowly through the aisles. She carried herself with dignity, her head slightly lifted, her steps soft but confident. Though she was being treated poorly, she never once showed bitterness. Some customers admired her grace, but they also felt anger toward Martin for humiliating her. Minutes passed, and the atmosphere in the store grew heavier. Every time the woman stopped to look at something, Martin would make another sharp comment. "That necklace costs more than a car," he said at one point, with a chuckle under his breath. "It's really not something you should be considering." At another moment, when she touched a handbag, he muttered, "That one is handmade. It would take someone years of savings to buy it. Maybe you should look at the sale rack outside instead." The words were cruel, not because of their sound, but because of the pride behind them. He wanted her to feel small, to walk out with her head down. Yet she did not. She kept her posture, she kept her gentle smile, and she kept showing respect even to the very person humiliating her. At last, the woman paused near the entrance of the store, as if she was deciding whether to stay or leave. She looked around once more, her eyes soft and thoughtful. Customers continued to glance at her, some shaking their heads at the way she was being treated. One elderly man near the cashier muttered quietly, "What a shame. That young man will regret this one day." Martin stood proudly at the counter, convinced he had done the right thing. In his mind, the store had an image to maintain, and people like her did not belong in it. He even imagined that his manager would be pleased with how he handled the situation. But what Martin did not know was that time was ticking. Only a few minutes remained before the store doors would open again to someone who would turn the whole scene upside down. Life was preparing a lesson, not just for Martin, but for everyone in the store. The whispers, the stares, the discomfort, they were all building towards something unforgettable. The woman, patient and calm, adjusted her purse on her shoulder. Her fingers touched the strap gently, as though steadying herself. She stood near the jewelry display, waiting. No one knew what she was waiting for, but there was a quiet strength in her presence. Martin, however, leaned back with arrogance, convinced he had won. He believed he had protected the luxury of the store from someone unworthy. Little did he know, the true meaning of worth was about to be revealed to him in the most unexpected way. The seconds passed slowly, but to those watching, it felt like the calm before a storm. Customers whispered softly, the employees shifted uncomfortably, and the older woman continued to stand with quiet dignity. In just a few more minutes, everything would change. The large clock on the wall ticked softly, though the sound was drowned beneath the faint background music of the luxury store. Employees arranged displays carefully, customers moved from section to section, and the older woman continued to stand near the jewelry counter with her quiet dignity. She did not argue, she did not complain, and she did not rush. She simply waited, as though she had all the time in the world. Martin, the employee, leaned against the counter with his arms folded. He believed the situation was over. To him, she was just another person who would eventually leave, too embarrassed to stay much longer. He even allowed himself a small smile, thinking he had done his job well by protecting the image of the store. But the store's glass doors soon opened, and in walked a tall figure dressed in simple, comfortable clothes. His hair was slightly messy, his walk unhurried, and his expression calm. He did not wear flashy jewelry or expensive brands that screamed for attention. To anyone who did not know him, he looked like an ordinary man. But to those who did, his face was unmistakable. It was Keanu Reeves. At first, only a few people noticed him. A teenage boy shopping with his mother blinked twice and then nudged her arm in shock. The mother gasped quietly but tried to stay composed. Another young woman near the handbags covered her mouth with surprise, whispering to her friend, who immediately turned her head and nearly dropped the purse she was holding. Slowly, the energy in the store began to shift. People recognized him, their eyes widening, their whispers spreading like ripples across a pond. Keanu, however, seemed unaware of the stir he was causing. He moved with quiet confidence, his steps steady, his eyes searching for someone. Then, when he spotted her, the older woman who had been humiliated only minutes earlier, his face softened with a warm smile. He walked straight toward her, not caring about the expensive displays or the curious stares following him. "Mom," he said gently, his voice full of affection. The entire store froze. Some customers gasped aloud. Employees turned stiff, their eyes darting between the woman and the famous actor now standing beside her. The older woman's face lit up with a gentle smile as she looked at her son. Her calm expression turned to warmth, and in that moment, it became clear to everyone, this woman, the one treated with such disdain, was the mother of Keanu Reeves. She reached out and touched his arm softly. "Oh, you're here," she said in her kind, steady voice. "Yes, I didn't want to keep you waiting," Keanu replied, leaning down to give her a small embrace. It was not dramatic or loud, but tender and genuine. The love between them was visible, and it silenced the room. Martin, who had been standing confidently only seconds ago, now felt his chest tighten. His face grew pale as realization struck him like lightning. The woman he had mocked, dismissed, and humiliated was not just anyone. She was the mother of one of the most respected actors in the world, a man known for his humility, kindness, and simple way of living despite his fame and wealth. The whispers in the store grew louder now, but not directed at the woman. They were aimed at Martin. Customers shook their heads, some looking at him with disbelief, others with quiet judgment. A young girl whispered, "That's Keanu Reeves, and that's his mom." "Oh no, did you see how that man treated her?" Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding with disappointment at the employee. Keanu, unaware at first of what had happened, turned to look at the display his mother had been examining. "Did you find something you liked?" he asked her softly. His mother smiled but shook her head gently. "I was just looking. The things here are very beautiful." Keanu nodded. "Then let's look together." His voice carried no rush, no arrogance, only patience. He began picking up items she had shown interest in: the scarf, the gloves, the necklace. He held them with respect, asking his mother what she thought, smiling whenever she smiled. To the customers watching, it was a striking picture, a famous man, treating his mother with care and admiration, when moments earlier she had been belittled by someone who thought she did not belong. Finally, Keanu turned slightly and noticed Martin standing stiffly by the counter, his hands frozen, his face red with embarrassment. The moment their eyes met, Martin felt his knees weaken. He wanted to disappear. Keanu's expression remained calm, but there was something powerful in the way he looked at the young employee. It was not anger, not rage, but a quiet seriousness that seemed heavier than shouting. He looked at him as if asking, without words, "Why?" Martin swallowed hard, unable to speak. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The silence pressed on him, made worse by the stares of the other customers. Keanu turned back to his mother, his voice gentle again. "Would you like this scarf? It looks like something you'd enjoy." His mother touched the scarf once more, smiling at her son. "It is lovely. But I don't need anything, dear. I only wanted to see." Keanu smiled warmly. "Then let's get it anyway. Not because you need it, but because I want you to have it." The store was utterly quiet except for his voice. People watched, some even smiling, touched by the scene. The difference between the arrogant attitude of Martin and the tender respect Keanu showed his mother was so sharp it was impossible not to notice. As Keanu walked with his mother toward the counter to make the purchase, Martin's hands trembled slightly. He tried to prepare himself to face them, but his pride had already crumbled. He could no longer stand tall. The store, which had been filled with quiet whispers, now seemed frozen in time. Everyone's eyes followed Keanu Reeves and his mother as they slowly walked toward the counter. The gentle way he guided her with his hand, the way he listened to her soft words, it was all so different from the arrogance Martin had shown only minutes earlier. Customers stood still, pretending to look at displays, but their ears and eyes were fixed on the unfolding moment. Martin's heart raced faster than the ticking clock on the wall. Only a short while ago, he had mocked the older woman, dismissing her as someone unworthy of being in such a luxury store. Now, he knew she was not just any customer. She was the mother of one of the most admired people in the world, and that man was standing only a few steps away from him. Keanu reached the counter with a calm smile. He placed the scarf his mother had admired gently on the surface. "We'll take this, please," he said softly, his voice polite and steady. He looked at Martin without raising his voice, without showing anger, but the weight of his gaze felt heavier than any scolding. Martin's hands shook slightly as he reached for the scarf. His lips pressed together as he tried to act professional, but his earlier arrogance had disappeared completely. He knew everyone was watching him now. The other employees had stepped back, leaving him to face the situation alone. Customers whispered quietly, their expressions filled with judgment. They remembered how he had spoken down to the woman, and now they wanted to see how he would handle himself in front of her son. "Of course, sir," Martin stammered, his voice unusually soft. "Right away." Keanu gave him a calm nod, then turned his attention back to his mother, speaking to her with warmth. "Are you sure this is the one you like?" he asked. She smiled gently. "Yes, dear. It is very beautiful." Martin wrapped the scarf carefully now, his hands moving slower than usual. He felt as though the entire store was staring at every small movement he made. The proud smirk he once wore had vanished, replaced by a stiff and nervous expression. He wanted to say something, an apology, perhaps, but the words stuck in his throat. As he worked, Keanu's mother looked at him kindly. Despite the humiliation he had caused her, her eyes carried no anger. They carried patience, almost pity, as though she understood how lost he was in his own pride. Her calmness only made Martin feel smaller. Finally, Martin placed the wrapped scarf into a bag and slid it across the counter. "Here you go, sir," he whispered, his voice barely steady. Keanu did not take it immediately. Instead, he looked at Martin, holding his gaze for a moment longer. "You know," Keanu said quietly, his tone calm but firm, "every person who walks into the store deserves respect. It doesn't matter what they wear, or how much money you think they have. Dignity is not something anyone needs to earn, it is something you give freely." The words hung in the air like a gentle but powerful wave. No one spoke. Customers looked at each other, nodding slightly. Some even smiled, admiring the lesson hidden in the simplicity of his words. Martin lowered his eyes, ashamed. His throat felt dry, and his hands fidgeted nervously. He had expected anger, shouting, maybe even a demand for him to be fired. But instead, he had been given something far heavier, a lesson spoken with calm authority, the kind that would stay in his memory forever. I'm sorry," Martin finally managed to whisper. His voice cracked, and he could not look up. Keanu's mother gave a soft smile. "Thank you, young man," she said kindly, as though she had never been insulted at all. Her forgiveness was effortless, and it burned even more deeply into Martin's conscience. Keanu took the bag then, offering a polite nod. He did not gloat, he did not humiliate, he simply showed his mother respect, making it clear that no one should ever look down on her or anyone. The manager of the store, who had been standing nervously in the corner, quickly stepped forward, bowing his head. "Mr. Reeves, ma'am, please accept our apologies. This should never have happened. We value all our customers deeply." His voice trembled with worry, knowing the damage that had already been done. Keanu gave him a gentle smile, his calmness almost disarming. "I hope you mean that," he said softly. "Because the world doesn't need more arrogance. It needs more kindness." The manager nodded quickly, promising to make sure such behavior never happened again. Customers nearby whispered words of agreement. One woman murmured to her friend, "What a man," he could have shouted, but instead he gave a lesson that will never be forgotten. Martin stood frozen, his face pale, his pride shattered. He knew that no matter how many days passed, this moment would replay in his mind again and again. He had humiliated someone he thought was weak, only to realize she was stronger than him in her grace and patience. And worse, he had done it in front of her son, a man admired across the world for the very qualities he lacked. As Keanu and his mother prepared to leave, silence filled the store once again. But this silence was different. It was not heavy with arrogance, but with reflection. Every person in the store, from the customers to the employees, had been given a quiet reminder about respect. Keanu held the door open for his mother, his hand gentle on her back as she stepped outside. The sunlight touched her face, and she smiled at her son, her dignity unbroken despite what she had endured. Keanu followed her, walking with the same calmness he had carried throughout the moment. Behind them, Martin finally let out a shaky breath. He looked down at his hands, realizing they were still trembling. The whispers of the customers echoed in his ears. He knew he would never forget the sting of being corrected, not by anger, but by kindness. The store slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the energy had changed. Customers continued shopping, but with softer voices, as if reminded of something important. Employees moved more carefully, carrying a new sense of awareness. And Martin stood at the counter, quietly realizing that he had been taught a lesson in front of everyone, one that no amount of pride could erase. The sunlight outside was soft and golden as Keanu Reeves and his mother stepped out of the luxury store. The world outside was busy with cars passing, people walking, and city life moving as usual. Yet, inside the hearts of everyone who had just witnessed the scene, something had changed. The customers who remained inside the store were still whispering about the moment, replaying it in their minds, telling each other how powerful it had been without a single shout or harsh word. Keanu walked beside his mother, holding the small bag with the scarf inside. He carried it as though it was the most precious treasure, not because of its price but because it was chosen with his mother in mind. She smiled at him, her eyes gentle. "You didn't have to do that, you know," she said softly. "I know," Keanu replied with a small smile. "But I wanted to. It's not about needing things, Mom. It's about moments. And I wanted this one to be a good memory for you." She looked at him with pride, her heart full. It wasn't the gift that touched her, it was the love behind it, the respect, the way he treated her like she was the most important person in the world. And in his eyes, she was. Inside the store, Martin still stood behind the counter, his thoughts heavy. The world around him seemed blurred. The faces of the customers, the voices of his co-workers, even the shining lights of the displays, all of it felt distant. The only thing clear in his mind was the look on Keanu's face and the kindness in his mother's eyes. That kindness hurt more than any punishment. It reminded him of how wrong he had been, how small pride looked in front of true dignity. One of the older customers approached him quietly. It was the man in the suit who had been watching from the beginning. He leaned closer and said in a low voice, "Young man, remember this day. Money and clothes do not tell you who someone is. Respect does." Then he walked away, leaving Martin standing there with those words echoing in his head. The store manager, still shaken, gathered the employees later that day. His voice was stern but thoughtful. What happened here today must never happen again. We do not judge people by how they look. We do not humiliate. Every person deserves respect. His words were directed mostly at Martin, but everyone listened carefully. They had all been reminded that kindness mattered more than appearance. As the day went on, customers continued to come and go, but the energy in the store was different. The story of what had happened began to spread, first as whispers among shoppers, then as quiet conversations outside. People admired the way Keanu had handled the moment, but even more, they admired the calm dignity of his mother. She had endured humiliation without anger, and in the end, her patience revealed the truth about character. Keanu and his mother, meanwhile, walked down the street together. They did not talk much, but they didn't need to. Their silence was warm, filled with love and understanding. Keanu glanced at her from time to time, smiling gently, while she walked with quiet pride, her arm lightly linked with his. Back in the store, Martin replayed everything in his mind over and over again. He remembered his smirk, his mocking words, the way he had dismissed her as if she was unworthy. And then he remembered her calm response, her gentle smile, her lack of anger. He thought about Keanu's words, "Dignity is not something anyone needs to earn, it is something you give freely." Those words pierced through his pride like light breaking through clouds. That night, when Martin went home, he could not sleep easily. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how he had been humbled in front of so many people. But the shame was not just about being caught, it was about realizing he had been wrong all along. He saw now that respect cost nothing, and yet it meant everything. In the following days, Martin changed the way he behaved. He greeted every customer warmly, no matter what they wore, no matter how they looked. At first, some people did not notice, but slowly, others began to smile back at him, appreciating his kindness. It felt different. It felt right. And though the memory of that day still stung, it also guided him toward becoming a better person. For Keanu's mother, the incident was something she let go of easily. Her heart was not heavy with anger. Instead, she felt gratitude for her son's love, for the lesson that life had delivered, and for the chance to remind others that dignity is more powerful than pride. She lived her life with that same calm grace, never needing to prove her worth, because she knew it could never be measured by wealth or appearances. Keanu, on the other hand, carried the moment in his quiet way. He did not speak of it to the world, but those who witnessed it would never forget. They would tell the story of how a famous actor walked into a store and reminded everyone, not with anger, but with gentleness, that respect is for all. In time, the story spread beyond the walls of the store. People who had been there told their friends, and their friends told others. Each retelling carried the same message: never judge a person by their clothes or their appearance, because you never know who they are, what they carry in their heart, or what role they play in the world. And so, what began as an act of humiliation became a lesson for many. A lesson about humility, about kindness, about the quiet strength of those who carry dignity in their hearts. A lesson that even in the most polished and expensive places, true worth cannot be measured by money, it is measured by respect. Martin never forgot the look in Keanu's eyes, nor the kindness in his mother's smile. It became a turning point in his life, a reminder that arrogance leads to shame, but humility leads to growth. From that day forward, he lived with a new understanding, one he carried into every interaction. For the customers who had been there, the memory stayed as a story to tell, a story of how a simple moment inside a luxury store revealed the truth about humanity. Some told it as a reminder to their children, others shared it among friends, and each time, it inspired reflection. As for Keanu and his mother, they continued their walk down the busy city street that day, blending into the crowd as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for those who had seen it, it was a moment that shined brighter than all the golden lights of the store, a moment that reminded everyone of the simple truth: respect costs nothing, but it can change everything.